All right, guys. So this is a follow-up on the enhancements to the Bricks nested accordion. Got some great feedback in the Bricks Facebook community from David Brown and David Dindo. So David Brown initially talked about adding some additional ARIA attributes and roles to make it better for accessibility, which absolutely made sense, and I learned something doing that, which is great. And then David Dendo came back with another suggestion. Instead of using the standard HTML that Bricks inserts when you insert a nested accordion, to actually change it to use an actual button rather than a div with a roll of button. It makes sense if we look at all the accessibility documentation. It does say wherever possible use semantic HTML and use the ARIA roles and other roles when that's not possible. So I wanted to look at both of those, and we've ended up with exactly that. So this first accordion is just enhanced based on what David Brown suggested. And if we look at the DOM, so what we have here is a item in our accordion, and in that we have a title, and it's got a roll of button with a tab index of 0, and it's got ARIA controls, which is controlling our content here. So it's got the ID of the content. So those there were the first things that we asked for. So I think it makes sense initially if you're going to use a div, which default HTML you get when you insert a accordion and nestable. Right. So that's the first bit. Then the next bit is on the actual heading inside there, giving it an ID, and then on the content here, we tell it it's got a role of region, and the ARIA label by is the ID of that heading up here. So say whatever that label is, that's the label for my content area. So that makes perfect sense. I really appreciated that feedback and the resources that David referred me to for that. So that was great. We then had David Dindo say, well, with the ARIA specifications, they do say that if a element can be a button or can be a semantic HTML element, it should be. In this case, we could put a button here instead of putting roll button and tab index 0. I wanted to look at that. Now that required changing the structure of what Bricks inserted automatically. But it can be done and it makes sense, and I have done it here. So in both cases, these work exactly the same. The second case, I'm using an actual button. So here it's an actual button. I don't have the ARIA role or the tab index, and that's the main thing. And then inside of that, our heading 3 wraps our accordion title and our icon at the end. So that's the changes there. This little bit here, semantically different than what is normally inserted by Bricks. So let's have a look over at the editor. So in the editor, we've got the same as what I did yesterday there, exactly the same. Go back to that there. So the first one, there's our test accordion there, exactly the same as it was previously, except for I've added some JavaScript in here. Go through all of this. This JavaScript goes through and adds all the correct roles that is needed for this to work. Apart from how it already worked yesterday, setting these attributes just makes it more accessible as far as ARIA standards are concerned. So that's the first one. The second one is this one here, which required quite a bit more work. I actually called that a V2 version here. So go to our test accordion here. So if we look at our class there, so it's test, sorry, it's enhanced V2 accordions. This is a V2 iteration, and it's quite different in that what we've done here is, if we look at the first example here, we've got our standard item, and inside that we've got a title, which is a block, and we've got a content block. Inside that block, we've got a heading, we've got an icon. That's the structure. So what we did with our first title is we told it that this title is a button using ARIA attributes and role attributes. And that's the difference. We made that, just kept the structure the same, told the browser that this is actually a button. All right. The second iteration here, what we've done is a little bit different. We're taking the standard bricks HTML that it inserts. I've then added a block above here. In that block, I've told the custom HTML for that block to be a button. I don't need to add the ARIA role the role of button and the tab index of 0, because we're already telling it to be a button. This is one of my favorite features of bricks, is that you can make any element be anything with a custom tag, which is great. We then, our heading 3, we've made that our heading 3, but I can't use a heading element because the heading element just has the text inside of it. So I put a block in there for the heading, then just change the tag to an H3, and then I can have elements inside that heading. So then I've got a basic text, which is basically my title. I've got my icon. So in the heading element, we have our flex here. So we set it to a row with no wrap. So we never want this to wrap. Space between. So our text goes at the beginning, icon goes to the end, and center the content vertically. So that's wrapped in a block, which we've told to be an H3. So functionally, that's the difference, is that this title is actually now a button. And instead of having a block with a heading and an icon, the actual heading is a block set to H3. And then we've got our heading as just some text inside there, and our icon inside there as well. So that's wrapped in the H3. All right, now that's the start of it. And then in the JavaScript for that, all I've done in here is change my selectors up here to look for the V2s. And then down in the JavaScript down here, where it's in here, I just removed the JavaScript, which sets the role to button and the tab index to 0, because we don't need it anymore. All right, so the first option is just simple to implement, because all we're doing is the standard, insert the standard bricks nested accordion, leave the HTML as it is, and set some JavaScript to make it work. Second version, not hard, but it's a little bit harder because we've got to change the structure of the HTML that bricks inserted for us. But semantically, this is actually a better option, because a button should be a button. It does create one extra level of complexity, which is when we're doing our CSS for it. We need to do a little bit more in here, because that's a button. So this title here is a button. The buttons by default in your bricks will normally have some style associated with it. And we don't want this to look like a button. We want this to look like an accordion header. So what we need to do is we need to override a lot of the stuff that was set by default for a button. So on our heading size, we're going to have to set that there. We can actually go directly to the element, and we can set our, using our UI, and we can set our settings on there if we wanted to. But this just keeps it clean all in one place. So we've got to change what is our heading going to look like. And we've got to set our padding on the button. I probably should have renamed that. Our title is actually the button now. We're going to set all our padding on that, so that we don't end up with a border around the button, a non-clickable area. So we're going to change the way a little bit with the CSS. Not hard, but just different. And I think this is actually a better outcome anyway. And look, reality is, once you've got this there, you're either going to put a query loop on that, or you're just going to duplicate these items anyway. So it's only the initial setup that's different. I think it's a better way. I think for accessibility, it's cleaner. It makes more sense. Let me know what you think. Thanks, guys.